So today I'm talking about masks, an obviously contentious issue in the year 2021. Today's Sunday. It's a beautiful sunny afternoon, and I have a lot to say about this. I think a lot of people have a lot to say about this. Unfortunately, the conversation around masks is so divided and filled with yelling that it's not even a conversation. I don't even know if the conversation is happening like it should be. And to me, the only way through these subjects is to just talk about them. Like there's nothing else we can do. We can listen to authorities, but the authorities should want us to talk about it too. Like we should be behaving reasonably in response to this pandemic. It's a real virus. It really exists, and it is actually killing people, and it is actually dangerous. And these might be tools that we could use to help save lives, but you have to use tools reasonably. I don't use a hammer when I don't need a hammer, right? It's just, I've seen people wearing these things in situations that make no sense. Like, for example, just now when I started this video, I was wearing a mask. I'm by myself in the woods. Is it reasonable for me to wear a mask right now? No. If you think it's reasonable, then you're wrong. It's just, we need to be able to say that. We need to be able to look at people and we need to be able to tell them, hey, right now, when you're wearing this mask, you're not doing anything. You maybe, you could always make the argument that you're leading by example. Maybe you're wearing the mask to demonstrate to people around you that this is what we should be doing. That could be important. It might be important for politicians to wear masks sometimes in photo ops or videos, just to lead by example. It might also be important to wear them to make other people in the space that you're in feel safer, right? I understand these arguments. These make sense to me. But if we're talking about using these as tools with physical consequences, then we need to understand, we need to have a conversation about when it makes sense to wear them and when it doesn't make sense to wear them. And right now, the conversation is just two extremes yelling at each other. It's just, wear this all the time or else. Like, this should be on your face the minute you leave the house, and it should not come off your face until you get back to your house. I think for some people, they're wearing them inside their house. And then for other people on the other extreme, it's like, this does literally nothing. They should never be worn. And, it gets into the whole thing about the authoritarian takeover of the regime. And like, we're just two wacky sides of a spectrum just yelling at each other. That's the only conversation I see. It's funny is that a lot of this is trusting authorities, and you hear this argument a lot. Trust the science. Look at the science. What does the science say? Science tells you what is and what is not. It doesn't tell you what should or what should not. It doesn't provide us with ethics. It provides us with information that we can use to guide our ethics. So this trust the science, like the science doesn't say wear a mask. The science can tell you what the mask is doing, and then it can tell you whether or not you should wear a mask, right? So let's talk about the science for a second. Let's talk about the physics, the biology. What are these masks really doing? So, COVID-19, it's a virus. A virus is very, very small. It's measured in nanometers. You've never seen a virus with your eyes, and you never will. So, we wear these masks. The intention behind the masks is to either protect yourself or to protect other people from yourself when it comes to transmitting this virus. So how does the virus get transmitted? That's an important question. If it gets on your forehead, do you get sick? If you touch it with your finger, do you get sick? If you inhale it, do you get sick? Like, these are things, in the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know. Like, there's people sanitizing their groceries when they got home, and there was, back when we didn't know anything, maybe it was reasonable to do some of these things. But now we know. I mean, I'm just going to try and start with things that we all agree on that I could go to a hardcore red team, hardcore blue team, and they'll both agree. So I'm just going to build from there, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to just build off of first principles that everybody agrees on, and maybe we can come to some sort of reasonable conclusion that can guide our behavior. So, it's a respiratory illness. It gets into your lungs. It's pretty clear that it's transferred through mucous membranes. So if you just get one on your skin, like if I were to get a single particle of COVID onto my hand or something, as long as I don't stick my hand directly into my mouth, it'll be fine. You know, wash your hands. You'll be all right. But that's not really how this thing transfers. It seems from I think we can all agree that the main vector of transmission for this illness, which is a respiratory illness that gets into your lungs, is through your lungs. So it'll transfer through mucous membranes. What's a mucous membrane? It starts pretty much everything behind your lips. You know, your mouth, your throat, your lungs, your esophagus, your stomach. That's all inside of you. That's all a mucous membrane. Your nose, the inside of your nose, and your eyes are also potential vectors of transmission, right? So how does a virus like this transmit? A particle will exit one person's body, a viral particle, and it will get onto the mucous membrane of another person's body. And from there, it will multiply and infect the person, right? That, I don't know who can disagree with that. I mean, it can also get in through your bloodstream. Maybe you get it on your arm, and then your arm's got a cut on it. Maybe it gets in through there. But the main transmission vector is eyes, nose, mouth. So these masks, right? They cover your nose and your mouth. They should be stopping transmission, right? That's why we're doing it, I think. That's why people are wearing these masks. But let's talk about these masks for a second. Let's talk about this thing right here. This is what most masks look like. It's either this kind of thing, or it's like made out of cloth, like a t-shirt or something, right? Like people are basically tying t-shirts around their head if you think about it. So what effect does this have on the transmission of COVID? Does it prevent COVID 100%? Does it do nothing to prevent COVID from spreading? I don't think so. I think it's somewhere between 0 and 100. I hope we can all agree on that. So, I just want to talk about, let me bring up a few examples. I spent the months of February 2021 to May 2021 traveling around the country. I did a sort of a van life trip from Southern California to North Carolina, and I went from, you can just trace a line along the south of the United States. I hit most of the states, kind of zigzagged around. But I spent 3 months, and I went to bars, restaurants, gyms. You know, I just lived life in these states, and I just witnessed the behavior of people around me. And it's almost absurd. It was almost comical to me how different the behavior was from place to place. And sometimes two places right next to each other. Like there'll be a gym where 100% of people are wearing masks. The second you walk into that room, there's people standing there going, yo, wear a mask, put it on. You're like, all right, whatever. You go in, and then later that night, Or just like an hour later, you go to a restaurant, nobody's wearing masks. You go to a bar, nobody's wearing masks. Like this is irrational. This is not how we prevent a pandemic from happening. It has turned into too much of a social signaling game at this point. It's too much of whether you're on the team or not on the team, whatever it is. Like, right? If you want to prove that you're on the blue team, you wear a mask. If you want to prove you're on the red team, you don't wear a mask. And that's silly. It's insane. We should not be behaving this way. So, all right. So how do I think we should be behaving? I have to start stating my opinion, or maybe state my thought process on how this works. So a virus is really small. Using one of these masks to block a single virus particle is the same thing as blocking a BB gun with a volleyball net, right? But the thing is, the virus doesn't travel by itself. It will latch on to something that you're exhaling. So when you breathe in and you breathe out, like I said, there's a mucous membrane. And when you exhale, little tiny droplets of your mucus and your saliva and everything will come out of your breath, right? This is understood. You can go watch videos of this. So these exhaled bits of water, mucus, whatever else that comes out of you will vary in size, right? Some of them are going to be droplets or things that are big enough that they just fall straight to the ground in front of you. If there's COVID inside of those, they end up in the ground in front of you. Or if you're breathing directly into somebody's face, they'll end up in that person's face. So that's one scenario. But I think the more dangerous, the more important thing to consider is the aerosolized droplets. So sometimes you exhale and there'll be droplets that come out of you, again, mucus, water, whatever it is, and they'll float around in the air around you for minutes, hours perhaps. I mean, it depends on who you're talking to, which study you're looking at, but we know that exhaled particles float around you. So that's where transmission comes from. You exhale particles and somebody else inhales those particles. So I would exhale COVID, somebody standing next to me inhales it, gets in their lungs, multiplies. That's more or less what's happening here. I don't know if I bring up more factors into this because there's a lot of variables to consider. For example, if you're outside, if I exhale, it just scatters everywhere, right? If there's wind, it'll just blow everything away. Like if somebody's standing downwind from me versus upwind, it's going to make a difference. If it's really sunny outside, that makes a difference. Ultraviolet light kills everything. It kills all living things eventually. So viruses are especially susceptible to these things. And I think everybody agrees at this point that COVID is susceptible to ultraviolet light. Also humidity in the air. I think if it's lower humidity, it probably dies more quickly because your droplets are going to kind of evaporate. I'm not as confident about the humidity, or temperature. But the evidence really shows that, no, I don't want to talk about evidence. I'm not going to be one of these people that brings in too much external data. This is first principles. So in what situation, given the fact that you're exhaling these little aerosolized droplets that may or may not contain COVID, and given the fact that the transmission happens when somebody else inhales the droplets that you've exhaled, or vice versa, when does it not make sense to wear a mask and when does it? Like I said, you don't want to be breathing directly into somebody else's face. Like if you have to have a face-to-face interaction with somebody where both of your faces are kind of within 6 feet of each other or whatever the distance is of an exhaled breath, wearing a mask probably makes sense. because you're blocking most of the droplets from just going directly from your face into the other person's face, and then you're leaving. So all the rest of the exhaled air you're bringing with you, and you know, it's a brief interaction, so it makes sense to do that kind of thing. But let's imagine a situation where you're in, like, this will sound kind of extreme, but I mean, for some people this is reality, where you're in a small room with maybe one or two other people or many other people, right? A small room where the air's not circulating, maybe it's windowless or the air is circulating slowly. So if I'm sitting down right here, I'm sitting down, I'm in a room, and I'm exhaling. I don't know how many times people breathe per minute, but it's a lot of times. You're going to fill up the air around you with your breath. A mask doesn't stop that. A mask does not magically capture all of the viral particles that escape from your mouth, right? This is one thing I'll say. Just Google people that vape. There's people that will take a huge draw of a vape. They'll put the mask on and then they'll exhale. You can see that it's clearly, you can see that right here on the edges, it clearly comes out of the edge of the mask. It comes out of the top, especially if you have facial hair. I mean, that's huge. You're making huge air gaps, right? So when you exhale, a lot, I mean, the air hits the surface in front of your mouth or your nose. And it's not like it just stops there. It doesn't just, oh, I'm done. No, it goes out of the side. It's air is a fluid. It wants to escape, right? So when I'm exhaling and I'm wearing one of these masks, I'm exhaling aerosolized particles out of the sides of the mask, up and down. Some of it gets through the mask because none of these masks are impermeable unless you're wearing a block of steel on your face or glass or something. It's going out the sides. So if I'm sitting in a room next to somebody else and we're both wearing masks, those masks aren't doing anything. There's no reason to wear those masks. If we're going to be sitting there next to each other for 8 hours a day, like some of these work environments are, it doesn't make any sense. I'm getting too worked up about this. I gotta slow down here. I almost got into a physical fight in Austin, Texas. I was in a situation where I didn't think I should be wearing a mask, and this guy and his girlfriend really thought I should be wearing a mask. They made it clear, and I said, nah, I don't want to do that. And I had to leave. I'm not going to go into too many details about where it was, but maybe I will later in this video. But it got really heated. I mean, I left because it was going to turn into a fight. There was no way to avoid it. So yeah, this is a very heated issue. When it really should not be. We should be able to sit down with each other and speak rationally about this. But really, this whole thing about the air that you're exhaling out of a mask doesn't just magically get trapped by the mask. So if you're in a small room, it doesn't even have to be that small. Like, just imagine you're sitting still and a cloud is coming out of you constantly. Every breath you take, you're constantly pushing your air particles in every direction. Maybe not directly forward, but it's going sideways, and it spreads out. That's how air works. So if you're, just to make up an example, let's say that you have a coworker, you both work at a gas station, there's just two of you. You have to stand next to each other for 8 hours a day, right? Like, that's just part of your job role or something. Does it make sense for both of you to wear masks? Maybe gas station's a bad example because there's other people coming in and out, but all right, let's say that you got a desk job and nobody else ever goes in and out of the building. It's just you and one other person, and you're sitting in a room side by side. You could both wear masks, but you're going to be breathing in each other's air no matter what. So why are you wearing them? Why? It really doesn't make sense. It's really irrational. Because, and this is another important fact, these masks are not zero cost. It's not free to put on a mask. It doesn't have zero disadvantage. I know it's a very common argument made. It's like, just put one on. What's the problem? Why can't you just put one on? I mean, the disadvantages are small compared to dying from a pandemic, from a virus, but they're still real. And when you play them out across society over years, like we have been doing, they have real consequences. And I'm just going to list a couple of them out. And they might sound trivial by themselves, but I think when you put them all next to each other, we should be more careful with our use of these things. Because, okay, how do I start this? There's so many examples that come to mind immediately. And I never hear anybody talking about this. So, number one, and this is the easy one, when you're wearing this thing, communication with another person just becomes harder. Like, we're humans, we're trained, we're creatures that look at each other's faces for social cues. I mean, we've all been in the situation now where you're standing around having a conversation with somebody, and it feels weird to have one with a mask on. You kind of have to communicate more with your eyes. And I'm not saying that this is like a life-altering, this isn't the worst thing ever, but it is a negative effect. I would rather not be wearing a mask than wear one when I'm talking to somebody. I personally feel very hampered. I feel less able to communicate with people when I'm wearing one of these masks. And as an adult, whatever, I can deal with it, but it's not nothing. It's not zero negative cost. And then when it comes to children, like, we're doing this thing where we have 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, toddlers wearing masks, and they're all in kindergarten wearing masks together, or they're just like, I'm no child psychologist, but I think that this is having a negative impact on children. I think that they need to be able to look at each other's smiles and frowns and faces all together. I think it creates, like, imagine being a 2-year-old and for a year and a half of your life, from like the age of 2 to 3.5, 99% of the faces you see are just the top half of a face. Like, I don't know how that affects a child, but it's something we should think about. It should be part of the conversation. And then, so what else? What are the other negative effects? How about just comfort? How many times have you been wearing this thing, and then you go outside or you come home and you take it off and it's like, you get fresh air all of a sudden, right? Like, you're breathing in this like nasty, warm, kind of like moist, stale, I don't know what it is. Like, it doesn't feel good to wear it. It's not a good feeling. It's uncomfortable. And again, if we're talking about discomfort versus dying from a virus or killing grandma, as they say, then yeah, but it's not nothing. And again, it should be part of the conversation. Here's another one. When you're wearing this thing, and this is one that seems like it would be, okay, so when you're wearing this, you're exhaling warm, moist air. And this is just I'm not exactly sure what material this is, but some people are wearing like t-shirts. Like I keep saying, like, it's basically just cotton on your mouth. What you're doing for hours and hours at a time is you're just exhaling your own, it's moist, warm air into a piece of cloth fabric that's tied to your face. Can you think of a better breeding ground for bacterial infections, for more viruses? Like, that just seems really unhealthy. And some people wear these things like, they don't clean them every day. They wear them like 5 days a week, hours and hours a day. Like, that's not sanitary. Like, I'm sure people are out there changing them out frequently, or using a new one every day, or washing them. There's washable masks, but it's another thing to consider. These masks are not zero cost. And here's one. How about just a piece of cloth on your face? How many people out there are into skincare? They care about this. It doesn't have zero effect on your skin as well to just have this piece of cloth attached to your face. So that's another cost. Not a big one, but it is. I'm sure it affects the health of your skin over time, right? We wash our clothes for a reason, so I know people aren't washing their masks all the time. I know there's people out there wearing the same mask. There's probably people out there who have been wearing the same mask for a year without ever washing it. That's gross. So these masks are not zero cost. So anytime you are deciding whether you should put one on or not, it's not as simple as just do it, right? It's what are the advantages, disadvantages? How do I weigh this? Again, if you're in some situations, like let's say you have a spouse, you're married, you obviously don't wear one when you're in your bedroom together. That would be wacky. That would be like the craziest thing. Because at a certain point, you just have to accept, okay, if my partner gets it, I'm gonna get it. Like there's like a gamble you have to take. Every time you interact with any other human being, you're sort of rolling the dice. And when it comes to rolling dice, like, in reality, this virus is not that dangerous to most people. It doesn't kill kids almost ever. It doesn't kill young people. I mean, I had COVID and it didn't kill me. I would think that I'm immune now. Like, okay, so here's another thing. Why is it that you can have two people who are both vaccinated and they've both had COVID before? So I would assume they're both immune. Let's say, okay, let's take the most extreme example, because I know this is also happening. You have two people, both vaccinated, they both had COVID previously, and they've both been tested recently, and they both came out negative. Should they wear a mask if they interact with each other? No. No, they shouldn't. Why is this happening? Why do we have rooms filled with vaccinated people where they're all wearing masks? Rooms filled with, I mean, yeah, I will have to make another video. I can't, this stuff drives me crazy. Like, I'm not an anti-masker and I'm not a pro-masker, right? I'm just a person who, I would like to do my part to help prevent a virus from killing people. I would like to do my part in slowing the pandemic, stopping the spread, right? I would love to stop myself from getting it, but I don't want to be walking around and have somebody yell at me for not wearing a mask when obviously I don't need to wear a mask, right? Like, if I'm not contagious, I don't have to wear a mask. And if I'm not worried about getting it, I don't have to wear a mask. Obviously, you don't know if you're contagious. You don't know if you're going to get it. But there are some cases where you can be pretty damn sure that you're not contagious. Like, let's say that I just got a test. Let's say I'm vaccinated. I've had it before. So I have both kinds of immunity, natural immunity and vaccinated immunity. Let's say that that's true. And I just got one of those expensive $150 tests that gives me results within like 20 minutes. Do I need to wear a mask now, like for the next hour of my life? No. So if I'm in a grocery store, if I'm going to Chipotle, and somebody asks me to put a mask on, I can be like, look, bro, I don't have to wear one right now. And that should be something that we're doing as a society. Like, this should be... But instead, we just have like, nope, everybody needs to wear a mask. Like, it's just like a cover-all rule. We're treating people as if they're morons. We're just acting like... And it's just making people hate it. I mean, you can't blame people for being against this stuff because it's not rational. We have people saying, trust the science. Like, bro, like, if you don't wear a mask, do you hate science? And it's like... I mean, I said this already. Science tells you what is and what isn't. Science doesn't tell you what to do. There's no should provided by science. There's no values or ethics provided by science. So that can't be used as an argument. I hate that argument because I've always been into science. I love science. I don't like seeing it used this way. So, what else do I have to say about this? This was a long video. I don't know. It's almost like venting after just, it's been, we're getting close to 2 years of this, and the rationality, the behavior around it it's not getting any better. And I just want there to be I want there to be just a reasonable discussion. That's part of the reason I'm making this YouTube series, is just, let's just talk. Let's just talk about it. Like, you should be allowed to talk about it. It should be encouraged. We shouldn't be getting into these battles. I mean, I see things on the internet of people, like, there's fights happening, actual fights over masks. People wearing them and getting in fights because they're not wearing them, or they are wearing them, and it's clearly, the issue of whether or not you should wear a mask has clearly just escalated into some realm that it shouldn't be inside of. Like, why is there a correlation between who you voted for and whether or not you're wearing a mask? Like, that's not good. That's not a good, we shouldn't. Alright, I'm just going to take a second to make sure there's nothing else I want to say. There are just some times where it's not rational to wear a mask. It's not always good. I think people on the red team, people that are very anti-mask, would be a lot more willing to wear them if they knew that the rules and if they knew that the behavior of everybody around them was more reasonable. They'd be more willing. Like, it's becoming a thing where it's like, people don't want to wear them just because they're being told to wear them, and I totally understand that. Like, that is exactly me. If I have everybody in a room demanding that I do a thing, I probably don't want to do that thing, and I'm not the only person that feels that way. And these masks are, it seems like, I mean, I'm not crazy in saying that it's more of a social signal than anything at this point. That's what it seems like, because I have friends who are fully vaccinated, who have had the virus before, and they still wear masks when they're driving alone. You know, they still wear masks if they're outside hiking. Like, why are they doing that? Like, why? Well, I'm going to put this video up, and I talked for a long time, and I hope I didn't say anything too reprehensible. I hope I don't come across as too... I didn't stay completely calm and articulate. I didn't do that, which is something that I should strive to do. Okay. That's enough for this one.